Greetings and welcome to FunSizeFilm 8. In this film we're going to be looking at and discussing using students' work samples as evidence of learning. Work samples are extremely powerful assessments because they show what a student can do. And really, work samples and learning photos and videos all have the same purpose, and we use them to document the way students perform when they're in their classroom on an ordinary, everyday sort of setting. And different skills and abilities are documented best in different ways. Obviously, you can't photograph a student singing and then make comments on the student's vocal qualities. Like that. You get it. So these four tools, student work, photographs, series of photographs, and video are things that you'll be encountering in class and using in your own portfolios. What's most important to remember here is that learning photos, videos, work samples, they're all intended to document student learning. If the students are engaged in a performance that is not particularly academic and you want to make a video of it for posterity, that's fine. But that is not something that I would consider a learning video. Likewise, a photograph of a student holding up a piece of artwork is not a learning photograph. It's cute, but it's not a learning photograph. And what we're trying to do here is document student learning and students' growth and development. And so we have to be very mindful about where we focus our energies and attention. A work sample is a piece of work that was completed by a child during a lesson, center time, free play, something that the child created, and something that provides concrete evidence of the child's skill levels and engagement in what's going on in the classroom. And when you choose work samples wisely, they can be extremely convincing evidence of student learning or documentation of student struggles. But you have to always choose work samples that demonstrate the strengths or the growth needs that you are documenting. The work sample process starts with you, the teacher. You see something in a student's work, be it a math worksheet, a writing project, an artwork that you feel is very representative of the child's current level of performance, whether that's a positive or a neutral thing or a problem. And you choose that piece of work because it reveals something important about the student as a learner. And you want to have that as a document to sort of be a placeholder for where the student is at this particular time in this particular year. A work sample by itself ends up just being a crumpled piece of paper in a Rubbermaid dish tub in your classroom if you let that happen. To avoid that and to make sure that you remember exactly what you were focused on when you chose the work sample, you need to have a cover sheet that thoroughly documents the ins and outs of this situation. You need the student name, the date the work was completed, a description of what the task or the activity was, and the reason why you chose the work. What was it showing about the child as a learner, and how was it important to your thinking about the child? And the next slide shows a sample of a cover sheet, sort of template, which I'll be posting on Camino for everybody. So a work sample, ideally, is the actual piece of work that was done by the student. But that's not always possible because sometimes students want to bring things home right away from their mother's birthday or whatever. Sometimes they don't want you to take the work. They care about it. Sometimes you're working in in a context where the work is temporary and can't be saved, like an enormous Lego structure. So if you cannot actually keep the work itself, it's really, really easy to take a high quality photograph or a color copy or to scan a piece of student work. That would work just fine too. And there's no need to fight with children about taking their work home. You have other options. So here's a work sample from a kindergartner named Marcus. And this was an entry from his journal. And you can see the documentation up here, name, date, what was the activity, and then what does it show about the student as a learner. So this is a well done work sample. In many ways, a work sample is like a candid photograph of a student's thinking. It shows how the students apply the skills that they've got to the real world activities and challenges that are posed to them in the classroom. And it doesn't matter whether it's work that you assigned them to do or work that they did on their own. Sometimes it's typical work, sometimes it's atypical work. That's the way that it goes. But those work samples will show the type and level of the academic work that a student does at school. And in representing their typical work, it might not be their best work. It might not be the pinnacle of where they can perform, but it also might not show places where the student has weaknesses. So they're partial, but they are useful in what they capture and allow you to share with others. Those of you who are in a clinical practice placement know that there is a big difference between what a student can do and what a student actually does on a day-to-day basis. And I use these elephants as a contrast. An elephant can balance on her front legs if someone makes her do it. She needs to be poked and prodded and rewarded in order to get into this gymnastic position. Whereas this other little elephant likes to stomp around and wave her trunk. And if left to her own devices, I think the elephant on the left would like to do the very same thing. But she has the skills and the self-control to do this gymnastic task, and this elephant on the right just knows how to be an elephant. Sometimes there's confusion about the difference between an informal assessment and a work sample. An informal assessment, like a running record or a developmental checklist, or the sort of document where the teacher asks the student to name the different letters and the sounds they make, and the teacher marks what the student knows and what the student doesn't know. All those kinds of assessments are very, very important and useful. They provide information about the kids as learners, they help plan more effective instruction, and they're used all the time. All teachers use them. We share that info with parents. But they're teacher-directed and teacher-designed, and so that they're tightly structured. So this leads to a different kind of outcome than you would see in a regular work sample where the student was taking this task on under his or her own volition. Let's share an example. So on the left you can see Brionna was writing letters such as B and Q and C and D and 8. Well, okay then. So the student teacher asked the child to write those letters so that she could document her skills. And this could be something that would be worthwhile. I have no problem with informal assessments. But what Brionna wrote here is different from what is written over here, because this was a photograph of a page from Brionna's journal entry that looks to me like that's a whale, but what do I know? I'm out of practice. Maybe it's not a whale, but it looks like it's under the sea, because to me this looks like a little fish. And the student wanted to include some narrative to go along with the picture that she drew, and you can see that these letters were all added. So this is spontaneous. This is a student who wants to engage with text, who understands that pictures often have a story that goes with them, and you can see all of that richness in this work sample that isn't in the informal assessment, because the informal assessment was designed to test ability to write letters, whereas the work sample was done by the student's free will. So to go back to our two little elephants, the elephant on the left, balanced on her front legs, is equivalent to informal assessment. Someone trained her how to do this, and then they prompted her to do this trick, and she will be rewarded for successfully completing it. It's directed by the trainer, I suppose, and the elephant would never do that out in the wild. That's something that the elephant is being told to do, whereas our work sample, little elephant, is stomping around and swinging her trunk because she's an elephant, and that's what elephants do. So to keep up with this natural world metaphor, work samples document what students do in their natural environment or their natural habitat. When left to their own devices to function in the classroom as part of that community of learners, how do they perform? So to conclude, I wanted to let everyone know that we'll have lots of opportunities to work together and look at student work samples. And as you look at all of the student work, you will come to see that there are some types of work that reveal more information about a student than other types of work. You'll also find that if you're working in a group with other credential candidates, you and your workmates may have very different interpretations of the same piece of work. And you'll also find that you have questions that cannot be answered. What was the student thinking? Could the student explain the purpose of the task? A million questions come up. And so I would just like to reiterate something I said earlier, which is that work samples can be enhanced by adding a short little documented conversation with a student. If you are really puzzled by something and you ask the student and the student gives you a reasonable answer, then you can just write that on a sticky note, stick it on the back of the work or the front of the work, and then you will have a clearer understanding of what the work shows. See you later.